With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. David Benn, Bishop class of 1980, a former student of Dr. Mower, who will share a few words and thoughts about Dr. Mower and introduce him. Thank you.
Good evening. Well, they say you can't go home again, but many of you in here tonight, I keep coming back anyway. And it's my great pleasure to have the opportunity to say a few words tonight about Dr. Otto Mower. Doc's been my friend for over 17 years, but ironically, my classes with Doc began after I graduated Bishops. Shortly after graduation, I was blessed to have the opportunity to accompany him here on one of his famous tours of art and history. And that trip changed my life. In fact, I was so moved by it that I accompanied him again in 1983 and again in 1991. And for those of us here tonight who have been with Doc on such trips, we know that they're more like pilgrimages. I Canterbury tales for the late 20th century. I think that Chaucer would be proud of Doc. During two of my trips with him, I was the driver of one of the vans which transported us from city to city. And let me tell you, among other talents, this man knows how to drive. In fact, one of my fondest memories is of watching Doc's van recede at the horizon as I struggled to catch up. And we used to even joke that the Germans named their highways after him, you know, the Autobahn. Now, there's no way that I can communicate in just a few minutes all that Doc has meant to me in my life. I would only say that I am who I am largely because of him, and I am but one of hundreds or thousands who have been changed by him being in our lives. Now, I know we all agree that Doc is a master teacher, and those of us who have taught, especially at the secondary level, know firsthand that teaching is an art. Therefore, I'd like to use deductive scientific reasoning to reach an interesting conclusion. Since Doc is a master teacher and teaching is an art, then Doc is a master artist as well. In fact, I would say that Doc excels in all three of the major categories of arts: painting, sculpting, and architecture, just like Michelangelo. As a painter, Doc's canvas is the human mind. And I can assure you that as a 17-year-old with Doc in Europe in the summer of 1980, my canvas was pretty blank. What Doc did then and still does so well is that he sketches the scene and adds the brush strokes which give color and meaning to our thoughts and our memories. Sometimes he paints with precision and detail in the style of the Netherlandish painters Jan van Eyck and Roger van der Weyden. At other times, Doc quickly places bold staccato brush strokes of juxtaposed colors, and it isn't until much later in life, when we can step back to ponder his work, that we realize he has created yet another masterpiece in the Impressionist style of Renoir or Monet. Now, as a sculptor, Doc's raw material is the white marble block of stone which we call the human character. And he chisels and chips away at this stone, defining it, shaping it, and revealing the outline of the treasures hidden within. Much like Michelangelo's slaves in the Accademia in Florence, however, Doc does not have the time to finish his masterpieces. And the beauty in this is that it is up to us as his apprentices to complete the sculpting and definition of our characters as we move through our lives, as we grow up. And finally, as an architect, Doc's talent is that he can envision the blueprint of the human personality. He can tell which of us will become Greek theaters, which will become Roman monuments, which Gothic cathedrals, and which Baroque palaces. Then, as a master builder, Doc meticulously directs the placement of the cornerstones, which will serve as a strong foundation upon which our behaviors and our unique personalities can be built. And so we have Dr. Otto Mower, painter of the mind, sculptor of character, and architect of personality. Of course, many of you are wondering, what about music? What about poetry? Doc himself will be the first to point out that Michelangelo was also a great poet. To these questions, I would simply say that as you listen to Doc tonight, observe his lyrical and melodic delivery and his ability to create images with words. I think it will become self-evident that he excels at music and poetry as well. And so without further delay, it is my privilege and honor to introduce to you a great yet humble man who has meant so much for so long in the lives of so many, our own Dr. Mower.
I'm blushing, and I should. David, you canonized me. Now I could die and go to heaven. You know, David is one of those creatures who is a scientist. Not only did he get the Bachelor in Arts in Physical Sciences from somewhere up there called Berkeley, he also got a teaching credentials from there. He is a doctor in biochemistry. I don't know what that means, but he's a doctor in biochemistry. And now, very wisely, he also went to obtain a master in business administration. One day he's have his own company and nobody will interfere. Now he's working for a company, the Gore company of Flagstaff, Arizona, is the specialist in medical products. And you know what? He went to Norway a few weeks ago. He came back. He didn't tell me about the business talks. I saw the exhibition of Catherine the Great treasures in Oslo, all the way from St. Petersburg. A scientist who talks about those things. He's a humanist after all. And that's why he was perfectly suited to this place. Some of you ask me, are you nervous? No, I'm not talking to strangers. Look at you. What an audience. Friends, memories coming back from far away, 78. And some of you haven't changed. I go to Switzerland every year to have a shot of, what is that? Something to keep me young, but the beauty is that we are together. And Master and Mrs. Teitelman, Bishop and Mrs. Hughes, Bishop Waldersdorf, an old friend of mine, of course, members of the board, teachers. I was so pleased to see some teachers who came after a long meeting this afternoon, which I avoided. Alumni and alumni, so many of you, parents of past and present students and friends. I'm so pleased to see some of my present students in the corner. I told them that after the speech there would be a quiz. So you think that you'll dinner for wait. Now let's become serious for once. The Mower Society plans to invite every year nationally and possibly internationally known figures, with the assumption and the hope that through their knowledge and their prestige, they may contribute to the study of humanities and to raising the intellectual level, the excellence of the school. In the past, we had Professor Emerita Mary Holmes from Santa Cruz, am I right, invited by our friend Dr. Rappaport. Last year we had Dr. James Humes, the former speechwriter for 5 US presidents. And if you remember the ones who were here, he entertained us royally. We enjoyed it so much. This year we unfortunately we failed in our 2 main contacts for a variety of reasons, and I am here to pick up the pieces. So that's why we hope in the future to invite even a greater variety of diversity of speakers, from scientists to writers, I would say, from explorers to theologians, why not? Or even from symphony conductors to bankers or activists, why not? Everybody has something to contribute, that's what we want. My topic tonight is very human geniuses. Namely, we'll talk about 6 great painters. We'll look at some of their works as an introduction, and then we'll go underground and look at some of their weaknesses. Not to sneer at them, of course, God forbid, but to love them even more, because great as they were after all very human. The 6 painters I have selected are Filippo Lippi of the early Renaissance, 1400 to 1500. Then the 2 giants, Leonardo and Michelangelo, high Renaissance. Rembrandt, Dutch art. Caravaggio, bad boy, a very bad boy of Baroque. And finally, Goya, Francisco Goya y Lucientes. So let's start with our friend Filippo Lippi. Filippo Lippi, that's the name. I put the name so that you might print them again in your mind. He was born in Florence, the son of a butcher. In Oltrarno, for you know, that's like the left bank of Florence. He became an orphan at the age of 2. Was raised by an aunt who was so poor that at one point she took him to a friar's school and said, "Just keep him." They kept him. He went to school, but he didn't like to study. He was always filling his books with childish type of drawings, until the Father Superior, according to a chronicle of those days, gave him every opportunity to learn the art of painting. What does that mean? It meant that he was allowed to see the great masters of the time actually working, and the greatest one was Masaccio. And when Masaccio was painting those frescoes that revolutionized the art of painting, there was Filippo, little Philip looking and learning. And what did he bring into art? Look at this Madonna. He brought 3 things. Number 1, he humanized his Madonna. Look at that. There is an intense quality of sympathy that little by little succeeds in making his Madonnas real mothers or real babies. The second quality, the color, reproduction, be it photography or slides, are never perfect. But his colors have a clarity and the purity that is amazing. You know why? He used the tempera, but then he put translucent glazes of oil on it. And the third one is the line. Try to concentrate on the line, the manipulation of the line. There is a wonderful flow of line. Oops. What happened? Wait, there's something wrong with my thing here. No. Okay. That's okay. That is not only points out the whole figures, but also the details. A wonderful manipulation of line. You know, the line here is handled in a sculptural way, if you notice, much more in a 2-dimensional way. It has been said that the ability of Filippo Lippi in the line has scarcely been surpassed. Now turn on the light, because we don't look at this anymore. We look at the bad boy. Peter, that's it. He became a monk, an improbable monk. He was an indolent, a self-indulgent man, frequently leaving the convent without leave, just out. But he never left his habit. Always went out with the monk's habit. He died, and you will see what he did. One day, Cosimo de' Medici, the ruler of Florence, gave him a commission. And then he realized that Filippo Lippi would not do anything because his mind was always on women or on seduction. So he locked him in the room. It lasted 2 days. He made a rope with his bed sheets and down he went. To spend the night in the town. He was arrested. Some of you might remember a poem by Robert Browning, Fra Filippo Lippi. Am I right, Gideon? And in that poem you see this poor monk arrested by the night watchman who is explaining to them that he is a monk. And they were so surprised that indeed he was a monk in monk's habit. Then, poor guy, he signed the contract. It was 1448, even before my birth. And he had an assistant, and they said, I pay you 40 golden florin if you stay with me 2 years. The 2 years passed. 1450 came. The man went. Filippo said, oh, no, I'm not going to pay you. I take you to court. He took him to court. And Filippo arrives in court triumphantly with a receipt. Here it is, I paid him. Except that the signature was not the signature of the assistant, but of Filippo himself. He forged the signature, and after some uncomplimentary treatment, he was punished. He confessed his crime. That's not the end. They came Lucretia. You call them Lucrezia, maybe sounds better. Lucrezia was a nun whose beauty and grace became an obsession with him. One day he goes to Mother Superior. Mother Superior, I'm painting a beautiful Madonna and I need a model. Could I have Sister Lucrezia? And the stupid, no. And the Mother Superior said, yes. Can you imagine? It was a big feast, celebration of the 1st of May. Great confusion in town. He kidnapped her. Now, this Lucrezia had been pushed into a convent by her stepbrother, who was tired of paying her expenses. So Lucrezia saw in the court of this lusty man of 50 a wonderful opportunity to live a life which she hated. They lived together. They obtained a dispensation from their vows. They were married. And they had a daughter by the name of Alexandra. And the boy, whose name is familiar to some of you, he became a painter, not a bad one. Filippino Lippi, the little Philip Lippi. Well, as you see, this man is quite... He died in October 49, around that time. And the Carmelite monks always took pride of him being one of them, because he was such a great artist. And I'm quoting now from the book where his death and burial are recorded, and it says, so rare was his grace in painting that scarcely any other artist came near to him in our time. To which we say, amen. Filippo Lippi was indeed a great genius and a very human one. We move now to someone else. Oh, this is Leonardo. We have to be careful because we owe him so much reverence, but we'll talk about him. Leonardo, the next one, because I want to see how he looked like. You probably remember this portrait of him. He was, well, he's an old man now, but he was always very handsome. He dressed beautifully. He had an enormous strength. They say that with his bare arms he could open without any problem a horseshoe. He was a beautiful singer, a marvelous lyre player, always surrounded by friends and students, courted by kings. There it is, Leonardo. Where was he born? Look, this is the village of Vinci, where he was born. If you drive, say, from Pisa to Florence at one point on the highway, you will see a sign. You may live and reach this town, this town, this. At the end, Vinci, the little place where Leonardo was born. Let's look at some of his work. This is not by him, it's by Verrocchio. However, if you look at this little image here, this angel, you are looking at the first work by Leonardo. What happened? Verrocchio finished the main figures, then he stepped back and said, oh, this is an empty corner. Look at one of his assistants. You, Leonardo, come over, paint something there. He did. The story goes that when Verrocchio came back and looked at that angel, he stopped painting. So let's go to the next one. This is a famous painting called The Virgin of the Rocks. There are two versions. One, you might have seen either one. One is at the National Gallery of London, and is the poorer one. It was not finished by him. This one is the Virgin of the Rocks at the Louvre. Notice the triangular composition, like a pyramid, a strong composition which he inherited actually from the early Renaissance. He uses the chiaroscuro technique. We should use probably light and dark, but no, art historians have to say chiaroscuro. Difficult to spell and difficult to pronounce. What this means is a gradation of light to produce modeling. Now, a drawn picture can be beautiful, no problem with that, but it's not faithful to facts. We don't see, when we look at lines, we do not. The modeling that comes to our eyes is modeling to the chiaroscuro. And this chiaroscuro, namely the light and dark, are used by Leonardo not only to model his figures, but to also model the psyche of the figure. He said that. He said light and shadow must be used for the expression of the emotional character of the person. This is what he called, I paint the intentions of man's soul. A famous expression. I paint the intentions of man's soul. He doesn't paint a fact. Look in this. The light veils and reveals, notice the difference, at the same time. The forms which are immersed in a layer of light between them and us. There is obviously this revealing and hiding at the same time. The ambiguity of light and shadow is used by Leonardo to express the ambiguity which is psychological for him. Now, I told you he never painted a portrait, a scene, an event, but the intentions of man's soul. Look at the background. Look at those rocks. They are not the rocks you see around here. Those are primeval rocks. Going back to the beginning of mankind, by painting this, one suspects that Leonardo, painting the intentions of man's soul, probably was thinking about redemption. Redemption that in the life of man takes many aspects. In this case, it happened to be a form of religious redemption, but he meant to paint something else. The Last Supper. You all know this painting. Badly damaged for two reasons. One, Leonardo was a scientist. He experimented with different material, and it was not always successful. The second reason is the humidity of the place. If any of you has gone to see this painting, you start, say, from the Milan Cathedral, and you notice that you go down. It's a low section of Milan. And Milan is famous for its horrible weather anyhow. It's right deep in the Po Valley. Goethe went once to see this fresco, and he wrote in his memoirs, I walked in a foot of water. So between those two, that's where the damage was done of this. Millions have been spent already to restore it, but it seems actually impossible. One of you will betray me, Christ has just said. And you see the reaction. The apostles are divided in a group of trees, like waves that go to the center where he sits still like the eye of a hurricane. The window behind him frames him, and the central window, of course, I mean. And above it there is a curved pediment that acts like a halo. Notice that it's not only the central focus, the emotional center, but also the vanishing point. All the orthogonal lines, for instance, the beams of the ceiling, is continued and meet on the face of Christ. So psychological and focal vanishing point. Did Leonardo paint a Last Supper? No, he did not. He painted the intentions of man's soul. What is he painting here? A tragedy. A friend betrayed by a friend. In that sense, even a religious event like this one takes a universal meaning. And the last one is Mona Lisa, the wife of a Florentine banker by the name of Zanobi del Giocondo. That's why in Italian she's La Gioconda, in French she's La Joconde. We call it Mona Lisa. So much has been said and written about it. She's shown in half-length view, her unbelievably beautiful hands. And you notice are quietly folded. The gaze is directed to us. Now, there is an ambiguity in this smile. The romantics of the last century made so much about it. Actually, it is a consequence of Leonardo's fascination with chiaroscuro, the atmospheric chiaroscuro, which in this case serves to disguise more than reveal the character of Mona Lisa. In fact, I believe all of you agree it is difficult to guess or to talk about the sitter's psyche. The light is subtly adjusted, the typical chiaroscuro. The precise planes are blurred. I did that purposely. The 19th century romantics who made so much of it ignored Leonardo's concern with the nature of light and of shadow. What does he paint here? The intentions of man's soul? Is it a portrait of a woman, or is it the idea of womanhood? The idea of redemption, the Virgin of the Rocks. The idea of a friend betraying a friend. The universal of womanhood is what he painted. That's what he said. I paint the intentions of man's soul. And the last slide by him is the embryo in the womb. Why am I showing this? Because even with some inaccuracies, I'm told, it could be used for medical instruction even today. But my point is, remember, that Leonardo, the scientist, is the father of scientific illustration. He started it. Thank you, the last one. Now, a great man, but he had no interest in women. No interest at all. He liked boys. He was accused of sodomy. And in those days, it was punished not only with jail, but a stake with fire under it. Who were his friends? Well, the first one, Francesco Melzi. He's described in a local document of the time as adorable and adoring, enchanted by the greatness of Leonardo, beautiful, gentle. When Leonardo wrote him letters, and the lazy Francesco never replied, this is what Leonardo wrote to him: why in God's name, of all the letter I sent you, you have never answered one? Wait until I come, and I shall make you write so much that perhaps you will become tired of it. In my opinion, this is a mock angry voice. Leonardo doesn't use sweet words. They are ineffective. They are stale. A man who writes such lines is a beggar of love. I have no doubts about it. Then he returned to Milan and found this Francesco. Francesco went to meet Leonardo with a jewel on his forehead. Nice jewel. Great waves in his hair. Looking like an angelic and aristocratic dreamer. Leonardo could not get away from him. He kept him. When he died in 19, Francesco wrote to the brothers of Leonardo and said, it would be impossible to express my anguish. While my body holds together, I shall live in perpetual happiness. And then comes a marvelous sentence. The loss of such a man is wept by all, for it is not in the power of nature to create another. The statement. It is not in the power of nature to create another. And finally, on an idle page, Leonardo wrote one day, Maestro Leonardo Fiorentino, Master Leonardo from Florence, and Francesco, dots. You might say, well, that's fine, except that this cryptic entry is explained by the rest of the page. There are lightly embracing nudes among scattered flowers. Is that a rare vision into Leonardo's emotional life? Probably. The other friend of his was a strange man called, his real name was Salaino, but everybody called him Salai. He was probably the son of an Hungarian armorer working in Florence. He was described by contemporaries as handsome. But also they say he was quite a character. He was wanton, he was vain. Leonardo, listen to this, dressed him in rose and green with feathers, hose of velvet, fanciful shoes with rose edge that should be changed every spring. One day, Salai said, I would like to be dressed like a daffodil. Leonardo brought him silver cloth, green velvet with a fluttering of ribbons and even little gilt meshes. One day he said, Salai stole money from me. What a cruel brevity. Salai stole money from me. Another time, again, he stole money, and he threw back on the face of Leonardo all the kindnesses he had received, but Leonardo could not get rid of him. Salai was a Greco-Roman type with a straight nose, dreamy eyes, a curled mouth, a brief chin, and most of all, an unbelievably beautiful hair. He went with him in exile when Leonardo went to Amboise in the Loire Valley. Salai went with him. Some of you might have seen the Clos Lucé, the house where Leonardo lived. Up in the bedroom, when he was dying, and Salai was with him, Leonardo gave him his coat, to which he was very attached. It had all borders of leather. Supreme gesture. This is what Leonardo did. Was he a great man? Yes. I am told that with today's measurement, his IQ was probably 600. It takes 10 of us, I guess, to do so much. But even so, a great genius, a powerful man, a great artist, and very human, as we all are, I guess. Then comes my friend Michelangelo. Well, Michelangelo was the opposite of Leonardo. The opposite. Medium height, head too big for a rather frail body, broken nose, small legs, crooked legs, small eyes, large ears, with 7 wrinkles on his forehead, never cared about his clothes, never cared about his cleanliness. And yet, a man whom even his contemporaries called the divine, Michelangelo. This is how he was painted by Raphael in the famous painting, The School of Athens. There he is. How did he paint himself? There. This is Saint Bartholomew in the Last Judgment of the Sistine Chapel. Bartholomew was martyred by being flayed. So he's holding his skin, and Michelangelo painted his own caricature in that skin of Saint Bartholomew. However, we have great works by him, you all know them. Let's begin with the Vatican Pietà. He was only 23 years of age when he did it. He did marvelous work even at 16, 17. This is the first one. The first of the 4 Pietàs that he made. Look at the drooping right arm of Christ, the lifeless torso, the turning of the head. Everything points out to the great knowledge that Michelangelo had of anatomy. The face of Mary is tearless. Her hands, her bowed hands, the ample folds of her dress, which both receive and support the body of her Son, are expressing the universal sadness of death. Technical perfection and an intense emotion make of this sculptural group a supreme expression of beauty. It is the only word that Michelangelo ever signed, and there it is. On the ribbon that crosses the chest of the Virgin is written Michelangelus Florentinus fecit. Michelangelo Florence did it. Why? There was a group of pilgrims visiting St. Peter's, and they were looking at this statue, just recently placed there. And the guide said, this is a statue by a young man called Michelangelo. One of the pilgrims says, no, sir. This was done by a sculptor of Milan who was a hunchback. We know him. Michelangelo heard that. There was a scuffle among the pilgrims. The Swiss guard had to intervene. Michelangelo stayed in the church after they closed it. And at night, with a candle perched over his head, went and sculpted across the chest of the Virgin his name. When some friends noticed this group, they said, but that's the face of your mother. That's the face of Francesca, who died when Michelangelo was just a few years old. As you know, this was attacked recently by an insane man. That's why today is behind a protective glass. The other work is the David. David came from a block of marble that he purchased in 1501 and worked for 4 years until it was placed on the Piazza della Signoria, the main square of Florence. The sculpture portrays not only the David of the Bible, but mainly the David symbol of Florence. Why? It was commissioned by the city, in fact. Florence was a small city. It was continually threatened by Milan and France. And so they compared themselves to David. We are standing up to the Goliaths of Europe. So David is our symbol. David in Tyre's body gives the impression of a coiled spring. You notice the preparedness. It gives the impression of the preparedness and the impatient expectations that all the Florentines had when they heard of enemy armies approaching. Millions of people still enjoy and marvel at this monument. When it was placed in the piazza, a city councilman was present for the festivities. A city councilman who pretended to be an artist. Every Florentine wanted to be an artist in those days. So he looked very intently at this giant because it's 13 feet and 5 inches. And they call the giant the Florentines to this day. This councilman was looking up like this and said to Michelangelo, Maestro, I am an artist too, you know. And I know that the nose is too big. Michelangelo said, yeah, and ordered a ladder to be brought. Then he got his mallet and in his left hand he put some marble chips and powder. And then he went up the ladder with the chisel and the mallet and started working on the nose, letting some chips and powder fall from his left hand. When he came down, the city councilman, you know, they are. I said, Maestro, now the nose is perfect. Not before. Michelangelo, of course, loved that. He has this strange sense of humor. The Sistine Chapel. It was 1508 when Julius II said to Michelangelo, paint something here. At that time there was a blue ceiling with a few stars. Michelangelo said, what? I am not a painter. And the more he denied, the more obstinate Julius became, and finally Michelangelo had to give up. Look at this ceiling. 70 feet above the floor. 44 by 132 feet. And he lived up there on the scaffolding. He lived there. 4 years, 3 years, practically 4. Millions, again, of people have seen this masterpiece. And always deep, deep emotion. I should not say this, but so what? I saw it probably 40 times. Now I'm still moved, but the first time I cried. What a weakling. But I was impressed deeply. I still am by this marvelous work. Not this type of work would not have been accomplished in an entire life, except that it happened to be the life of a giant. A marvelous work, a synthesis of dogma, a synthesis of, you know, when he finished, his body was reduced to an awful shape. He wrote a sonnet about it. My body is like a bow. My head is unnaturally bent back. My belly is protruding unbelievably. There what he was. One day, by the way, Julius II and Michelangelo, you might have heard that they fought continually there because they were friends. Two strong characters, and when you are friends, you debate, but you are always friends. When Julius II died, Michelangelo went to the funeral, and the witnesses says he came out crying. They were great friends. One day he was up on the scaffolding, and an old woman came in. The chapel was empty. She came from Borgo. Even today is the popular section of Rome near the Vatican. And she knelt down. And as old people do, I am told, she started praying aloud. And she said, my God, why don't you help me? That good-for-nothing son of mine is in jail again. He keeps fighting. What shall I do, please? All of a sudden, a booming voice came from heaven. Of course, if you have faith, that was the booming voice of God. My daughter, don't worry. I'll do something for you, etc. And the woman stood up happily and left the church, the chapel, drying her eyes. And I can see so well, even now, on the face of Michelangelo, an impish and maybe remorseful smile. He had played the part of God finally, besides painting him only. The last one is, I believe, the Moses. Yeah, all of you are familiar with this statue. 13 to 15, 2 years, a little over 2 years. Presents the leader of the Israelites as a symbol both of physical and moral greatness. Sitting down, but if you look at his left leg, he's about to stand up. Because his flashing eyes, the bulging muscles, the swelling veins are expressing his enormous energy, his wrath at the Israelites worshipping the golden calf. A marvelous work indeed. The art historians, as usual, try to use some foreign words to express this, and they use the word terribilita. The terribleness. God forbid me for using the word, but terribilita. The awesome quality of this statue. It's meditative, but also ready to explode. It gives an unforgettable impression of grandeur and of beauty. I have to tell you a story, I cannot keep it. When this statue was put in the Church of St. Peter in Chains, just above the Colosseum, if you remember, every Saturday the Jewish community of Rome started going there to revere their leader. And they went to this church and they had their own prayer ceremonies, whatever, in front of the Moses. And a writer of the time says, and well they should, because this statue is more divine than human. So, a commentary. Now let's go back to the poor Michelangelo after seeing the great Michelangelo. He did not like women. Is there another one, I believe? Hilary? Yeah, leave it that for a moment. He did not like women. He believed that the male body was much superior to the female body, and he used male models. Even to do works like this. This is the knight in the tomb of Giuliano de' Medici in the Sacrestia Nuova, the new sacristy. Look at the legs. And with all due respect, look at the breasts. They seem to be made of rubber. Thank you, Hilary. When Michelangelo went to Rome in 1534, he was to work, but he was to see Tommaso dei Cavalieri, his boyfriend. He said that the beauty of that boy is like the Greek ideal. Plato talked about beauty existing in the Hyperuranian. Beauty came down, is now in the body of Tommaso dei Cavalieri. Incomparable beauty. Now, when Michelangelo wrote to him, listen to this, he always rewrote his letters. They wanted to be elegant. Why? And this I'm quoting, to express my immense love for Tommaso. Immense. Ladies, how many men have told you my immense love? He added for this boy. Now, there is, and at this point I will be simple, he wrote a sonnet and translated, it comes out to these lines. Defeated, captured, I should be happy, not surprisingly, if naked and alone I am the prisoner of an armed knight. Except that in Italian, knight is cavaliere, which was the family name of his friend. And in the original, he put cavaliere with a capital C. The heirs of Michelangelo didn't like this, of course, and they changed the sonnet like this. Even in suffering, I'm happy, not surprising. If lone and defenseless, boldly I meet a strong and virtuous heart. What happened to the Cavalieri? It was only in 1863 that the original was finally published. To save the name, of course, of this. Now we have a masterpiece. We have another Michelangelo. His name was Michelangelo Merisi, but he was born in the town of Caravaggio, not too far from Milan, and so we call him Caravaggio today. Look at his name, Caravaggio. Caravaggio was the bad boy of the time. As an artist, he had an outspoken disdain for previous masters, and his unconventional life was nothing else but the expression consistent with his individualism. He, however, is an outstanding artist of the Baroque. Baroque is the period that goes from 1600 to 1750, including the last part, which is called Rococo. He introduced two things in art, which the strong contrast of light and dark, which his contemporary found shocking and beautiful at the same time. Second, he introduced lay religiosity. That means painting a religious scene as if it were not religious. This is the famous calling of Saint Matthew. Look at that. Matthew is sitting at the table. He was a tax collector. He's surrounded by people dressed elegantly. His agents, probably. They are in a tavern, a Roman tavern, and then two people come from the right, barefooted with poor clothes on, and one of them points his finger to him. Matthew, with his left hand, who? Me? Do you notice? There is nothing religious except the very faint halo that you see above the figure of Christ on the extreme right. This is lay religiosity. Lay religiosity, and the strong contrast. What makes this painting religious? The hand of Christ and the beam of light that takes the hand of Christ down to him. It is natural light, but it is a natural light which is given a strong religious symbolism. That's Caravaggio. The other painting is the conversion of St. Paul. Look at that. Who is the hero here? St. Paul on the horse. There is no feeling of the light and the voice that came down from heaven and changed the life of Saul, the Pharisee. Even the angle and the explicitness of the painting indicates this is not irreverence, it's the lay religiosity of Caravaggio. And remember this, after Caravaggio, there was so much Caravaggesque painting all over Europe. But Hilary, he was a bad boy. He was bisexual, dirty, a braggart, a gourmet, a good tennis player. He, as soon as he sold the painting, he would buy the best clothes available, but he kept them on until they fell apart. You know that we know much more about Caravaggio from police records than from any other record? And I put down some of the things he did. In 1600, he's in jail. Why? Unprovoked assault. In 1601, he attacked a sergeant of the guards at Castel Sandolfo, the old Roman building. The same year, he threw a plate of artichokes at a waiter in Albergo del Moro because he didn't like the artichokes, and threatening with his sword. And when they went to court, the waiter said, and he also said to me, shouting, "Do you take me for some kind of a bum?" In 1605, 3 times was he in jail. The first one because he went around, what did he do this time? Oh, he had no permit to carry the sword he had. He was in jail because he failed to pay his rent. It's bad. And the landlady was a certain Prudencia Bruna, who obtained a court order to take possession of what he had left in the house. He was mad. As soon as he left jail, he started throwing rocks at the windows of Prudencia Bruna. She went to court again and said, "You know what? He broke all my Venetian blinds just to hurt me." Oh, that's not finished. In October, he was wounded in the throat and here, the left ear. When the police said, "What happened?" "Oh, I just fell on my sword." We don't want to involve anyone. Then came the big story. It was the spring of 1606. He was playing tennis with a man named Ranuccio Tommasoni. They lost. He was so mad, he killed him. He had to go to Naples. The police wanted to see what he was doing in Naples. He ran away, went to Malta. Some time ago, a friend of mine said, "You know, my son is going to Malta to study Caravaggio." I said, "What? To study Caravaggio?" He was in Malta. "Oh, I know that. But there's only one painting by Caravaggio in Malta." Then I found out he had a girlfriend there. He was accepted in the Order of St. John in Jerusalem. Today is the famous Order of Malta. They have their own passport, you know, the aristocracy, etc. He was expelled, and the records or the order said he was thrust forth like a rotten and fetid limb from our order and community. He went back to Sicily. He was wounded again. But then what? He became mad at the teacher. He became so mad at the teacher because the teacher was objecting to the undue attentions Caravaggio was paying to some of the boys. So he had to run away again. He took a boat up to Porto d'Ercole, which is north of Rome. They stopped. He said, oh, I have to go see some friends. He left the boat. When he returned, the boat had left. And in insane attempt at reaching the boat, he started running on the beach. Maybe rented a horse. He collapsed under the heat, died 3 days later. And the irony is that his saints were not on the boat, had been put in the customs house for safekeeping. What a poor, great man. What a very human genius, Caravaggio. Who's coming up now? Oh, Rembrandt, Harmenson van Rijn. Rembrandt, the son of Harmens, who lives by the Rhine River. Well, Rembrandt, as you know, is the greatest artist of Dutch art. One of the most brilliant stars, both in painting and in graphic art. Do you know, by the way, that there used to be in the world catalogs 650 Rembrandts. Now the RRP, the Rembrandt Research Project financed by the Dutch government, has reduced the originals to 300. Can you imagine how many red faces there are in museums throughout the world? How much pain this has cost? Directors of museums invested money. In what? In nothing. He has been called the great heretic in art. He rejected the classicist style in order to use a dramatic style to express emotions. Some of the works by him are well known to you, such as, well, that's his portrait with his first wife, Saxia, about whom we will talk in a moment. And then his masterpiece is The Night. Oh, this is the portrait of his son Titus. We'll talk about him in a moment. And finally, oh, what happened to the first one, Hilary? Don't we have a night watch? Try the next one, maybe. There it is. This is the most famous painting by Rembrandt called The Night Watch. It was painted in 1642 on the occasion of the visit of Maria de' Medici. And it represents the captain and the lieutenant with members of their militia, if you want to call it. As you know, this painting was attacked recently, a few years ago, by another insane person, cut it into strips. Fortunately, it was restored perfectly and is now at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. This painting caused a legend to be born, that the fortunes of Rembrandt declined after 1642 because the members of this group had all paid the same amount of money. And yet some were disappointed because of the blurred figures that represents them, or they were overlapped behind someone else. We don't believe that, really. He lost everything because he was a foolish man in the way of life. Something has been tried to be explained, but it's typically Rembrandt, this incandescent little girl with a chicken hanging from her belt, as being called the one who provides the food needed by the company, but we don't know that. As far as easy comments on this work, you notice that the real event has been submerged in a symphony of colors, highlighted by the uniform of the lieutenant and by the red sash of the captain, the scarlet red sash. The light is irrational and wonderful at the same time. The Rembrandt has been able to turn a narrative prose into dramatic poetry. Even the shadows are deep, but they are warm at the same time. It is a painting that has a great amount of drama, of color, of tonal contrast, of movement. One of the great masterpieces of the Dutch art. You saw before the portrait of him with Saskia. Who was Saskia? Well, thank you, Hilary. Saskia was his first wife. She was a rich woman. And they lived together in a tumultuous type of life because they lived extravagantly. They had 3 children who died shortly after birth, and finally a 4th one, a son, Titus, who died just a few years after getting married. This is the famous portrait of Titus. Now, what was wrong with Rembrandt? What was the humanness of Rembrandt? Well, mainly in the relationship with women and this in extravagant ways. When Saskia died in 1642, she left a will saying, Rembrandt will inherit all my money, provided he doesn't remarry. How could he? He had a little son to raise, so he found a nurse. That was a serious business. By the name of Dirks. Very soon she became his lover. And foolishly, today we say so, he gave Saskia jewels to her, not realizing that there was another woman waiting. And another one came in. And the first one felt scorned and took him to court and said, he promised to marry me, he gave me these jewels, now he wants them back. It was a dirty fight. And you know how Rembrandt solved it? By having her committed to a house of correction. And so he had this new woman, Stoffel. Stoffel came in as a servant, was promoted to a nurse, was promoted to an unofficial wife. Why? Because of the punitive clause in the will of Saskia. After 1642, the life of Rembrandt became miserable. A few years later, he had to declare bankruptcy. There was an enforced sale of everything he had, including his very rich art collection. In 63, this common law wife died, 63. In 68, his son Titus died, and in 69, he died. You know, this man, great as he was, at one point, he had to go to a very humiliating experience. He would hide himself and go incognito through Amsterdam to shops selling prints. And he would say, do you have any print by Rembrandt? Sure, we have some. How much? 20 guilders? Oh, come on. This is worth 40 guilders. And he would pay 40, hoping that the entire city would witness the increased price in his. What a humiliating experience for such a great man. Rembrandt. When he died in 1669, his death went unnoticed by the world around him. Another great genius, but very, very human. The last one, I believe. You're tired, aren't you? Shall we stop or continue? There's only one more. Okay. Francisco Goya y Lucientes, from the Spanish Romantic period. He, at the beginning of modern art, in a sense, stands the great, imposing figure of Goya, El Pintor Real, the first court painter, independent. He didn't establish any school. He's a giant in Romantic painting at the beginning of the 19th century. He is a transitional type of artist because he, in a sense, changes tradition. He presents the future, prophesizes the future, and presents the present. What is his specialty? From a high vintage point of his art, he depicts in a bitter and unsparingly kind of what the capacity of man for evil. Remember that Spanish art is never sentimental. Rarely, at least, let's change never, rarely sentimental. It insists always with a ruthless honesty on the cruel facts of life, and Goya's art is no exception. Look at his first, this is the 3rd of May, 1808. He was a man who hated the monarchy and was hoping that the winds of the French Revolution would come over the Pyrenees and sweep away the monarchy. They did. But then the oppression of the French was as bad as that of the monarchy. One day, 2 Spanish rebels killed 15 soldiers from the Napoleon's army. The troops gathered 15,000, 1,000 Spaniards for 1 French and killed them all. And Goya resented this, the disappointment, the great disappointment of his life. This work that you see is not a war memorial, and you can see that is an expression of rage at the horror of man in humanity. Goya treats the firing squad as a many-legged, faceless monster before whose bayoneted guns are pushed, or is pushed an endless stream of Madrileños, group after group. The first is already shattered, killed by the bullets, streaming with blood. The next one are people gesticulating wildly in the last few seconds of their life. The third one is hiding the horror from their eyes with the rents over them. A paper lantern supplies the only light. And in the dimness of the scene, the houses and the church tower in the background blend with the earth against the sky. What a tragic scene. Now, notice from a technical point of view that Goya, instead of the soft realism that you find in such paintings as the Family of Charles IV, uses postures and gestures of the figure shockingly distorted. He wants to signify defiance, hatred, terror. Even the colors are acid. There is no harmony of colors. Why? Because violent suffering, because death can be expressed or rendered only in the painful dissonances of line and color, of shape and color. Now, he, in 1792, became increasingly deaf. But it was not a quiet deafness. It was full of sounds that replaced the sounds from the outside world. And this sound produced in him a weird, mysterious, haunting group of noises that came from the depth of his disturbed psyche. Unfortunately, they succeeded in creating in his mind Satanism, insanity, fanaticism, and violence. He created monsters, los caprichos, the monsters of Goya. He decorated his room, the walls of his house, with black paintings. Paintings of black magic, of tombs, of levitating witches. And his affairs. Besides his wife, he had a relationship with a woman called Leocadia, and most of all with the Duchess of Alba. There she is. There she is. The sash and the high cold dark, they should be eyebrow or fashion. But look at this figure that caused him so much trouble. The authorities, of course, disapproved of this relationship. Goya sent the mistress and their son to Bordeaux. And so for many years he kept living between France and Spain. The Duchess of Alba died. But he painted, and you remember, the Maja Desnuda. A naked Maja. Maja and Majo were the hippies of those days. And do you know that the family of the Countess of Alba, the Duchess of Alba actually, asked years ago that the bones be examined by a pathologist to prove that the naked Maja was not the Duchess. Why don't you let her rest, poor woman? And when he died, when Goya died, He died in Bordeaux. He was 82 at that time. He had expressed his insanity in many ways. For instance, in his dining room, he had a painting, Saturn devouring his son, so that while eating, he could see in front of him the specters, Saturn's livid red tongue that was licking and ripping off the top of his victim's headless torso. He enjoyed that. Can you imagine? When he died, however, people said he was such a great artist that we should examine the secret of it. So a phrenologist of the days took the head, separated it from the body, and studied it. We have no verdict. Was he found? And we have no head. The head of Goya was lost forever. Another genius was a very human, poor man. Well, I know you're tired, so let's conclude. I found the quotation from Longfellow that I think would be good. He says, men of genius are like a blazing meteor. When it descends to earth, it is only stone. Yeah. What a stone each of these 6 artists had. A stone that inside, and we have seen the stone, what they did wrong, the follies, but a stone that inside had a spark of the divine. We, as we should, understand the stone. But we also admire, enjoy, are grateful for the spark of their genius that created so much beauty. We can think of their humanness as we did tonight, but we think also of the beauty they created and that still remains. So indeed, our concluding statement is the 6 artists were great geniuses, but very human ones. And thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I forgot to say that I should have paid tribute also to 2. One is Bill Evans, who is not here, I'm told. Bill Evans was the founding father of the society. I regret that he was kept away by some important thing. And second, since he's late, I will not do what I promised my students in the corner. I thank you for coming to help us. I told them that after the speech, I will have a quiz for them. It's late, so no quiz tonight, okay? What? Oh, there she is. If you found food on your tables, ordering everything, not my merit. Thank you, Wendy. And you do that. And Sarah?
We actually were asked tonight who our caterer was. It was none other than the bishop's head of the kitchen, Sarah, and kitchen staff. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Dr. Mower. Thank you, Dr. Ben. And we'll see you all next year. Good night.